Oh, Canada, our home and native land. Millions of square kilometers with plenty of scenery to offer across 10 provinces and 3 territories. Ontario's amongst these. Home to the CN Tower, terrible drivers, Niagara Falls, Toronto Raptors, Indians, etc. Heading up north would take you to more lush and remote scenery. Like, seriously, take a vacation here. If you want to head up north from Toronto, you'd resort to driving. But years ago, you could have taken the train, thanks to what the Ontario Northland Railway calls the Northlander, which would have taken you from Toronto all the way to the beauty of Northern Ontario.
But why was it discontinued? Was it worth replacing it with bus services?
Yo fam, welcome to the video, bro. In this video, we're gonna be yapping bare facts about the Six's Sweeter Man's Train, yo. Ontario Northland's Northlander.
Our story begins in 1902, when the Timiskaming and Northern Ontario Railway was formed by the Ontario Parliament on March 17, 1902, with plans to reach the area of James Bay in hopes of extracting various minerals from the northern parts of Ontario. With years of progress due to the rough terrain, the railway finally reached the towns of Englehart in 1906 and finally Cochrane in 1909, with some branch lines extending out to Kirkland Lake and into the border of Quebec in the town of Northlander. The real challenge, though, was building the James Bay, as construction was halted in 1923 when Conservative Premier Howard Ferguson said that the extension of James Bay would be unprofitable, with the line halting as far as Fraresdale. But the railway didn't give up on their extension, as the line would finally reach James Bay on July 15, 1932, naming the terminus Moosonee, the Cree definition being at the Moose. In 1946, the railway would receive a name change to the Ontario Northland Railway, at the proposal of Chairman Arthur Cavanagh, and also to avoid confusion with the Texas-New Orleans Railway. Alongside some new mines opening up in the 1960s and dieselization finishing in 1957, the railway continued to bring freight and passengers well into the 1960s and 70s, from the heart of Toronto all the way to the quiet and scenic communities of James Bay. But what train could you take from Toronto?
Since the 1920s, the ONR ran an overnight passenger train called the Northland, which ran between Toronto and Cochrane in a joint effort with Canadian National, and later Via Rail in 1978. In an attempt to boost ridership to Toronto, the ONR would introduce an improvised service between the two cities in the form of the Northlander. This new service promised trains 6 days a week and departure times at 8 a.m. in both directions, meaning the Northlander would be a straight daytime run and just the right option for travelers going in and out of the city. As for the station stops, the routing goes as follows.
Alright. Toronto, Washego, Gravenhurst, Bracebridge, Huntsville, South River, North Bay, Temagami, Cobalt, Newlisgard, Englehart, Swastika.
Oh, Swastika. Whoa. Oh, easy.
I did not expect that name to show up. Seriously, what a name for a station. My sincere apologies to all you guys that had to hear that. Anyways, Matheson, Pourquoi, and finally Cochrane. Whew. Anyways, back to you, Winnipeg.
The journey between the two cities was speculated to be around 800 kilometers and a travel time of around 10 hours and 25 minutes, give or take. There was also service along CN's Newmarket sub to Barrie and Arilla, which was served in one direction to avoid turning the train around in Toronto. And what's a new service without some unique trains? Instead of ordering domestically, they reached out to the land of windmills, the Netherlands.
These train sets were the Swiss Federal Railway's Rams or the NSDE-4, which were diesel multiple units built by Dutch rolling stock builder Werkspoor and Swiss builder SIG in 1957, with 5 train sets built in total. The design of the cab contours came from Dutch designer Elsbeth van Bergholm, who based the nose on an egg, with angular contours and a windshield similar to airliners of that era. They had A1A trucks equipped with 16-cylinder engines and electrical equipment provided by Brown Boveri. These train sets were built specifically to work the Trans-Europe Express, or TEE, a widespread railway service bringing express train service across Western and Central Europe, having a modest service life of 17 years. As of May 26, 1974, the TEE would discontinue its use of its diesel train sets in favor of electric power. Nederlandse Spoorwegen considered rebuilding its train sets to be electrified, but this was never to happen, with the 4 remaining train sets being put up for sale.
The ONR would buy the 4 train sets in 1977, sporting a rather new livery, and to comply with Canadian regulations, had to have a lot of modifications, which included number boards, beacons, a multi-tone air horn, a steel bell, alongside a new interior with new furnishings and insulated windows. Compared to other Canadian rolling stock in this era, they were unlike anything else due to their smaller size to comply with European loading gauge, although you could argue that the nose design does feel slightly reminiscent of American cab units of that time period. Nonetheless, the trains were shipped to Canada the same year, and soon enough, service of the Northlander commenced on May 28, 1977. To quite the fanfare at Gravenhurst Station. Following much positive reception, the Northlander service was in full swing, with Northlander trains running up and down between Toronto and Cochrane on a nearly daily basis. Now let's talk about the train sets again. If there's one thing to love about this, it's the paint scheme. It looks a lot more modern and appealing to travelers and even advertisers. Not only that, the scheme was a vast improvement compared to other liveries which really feel dated and reek from the steam era. When it came to operating them, the ONR chose to run the power cars throughout the entire journey, more than likely due to the power car's balanced weight, and just in case of a level crossing accident. But it wasn't unheard of for the cat cars to lead occasionally. However, these train sets actually sucked, most particularly the power cars, as the main issue was weather. We in Canada are known for cold and rather brutal winters, and the power cars couldn't withstand the Canadian winters, which in turn led to breakdowns due to the freezing equipment. For example, the air and water pipes in the cars had to be insulated in hopes of reduced failures. On top of that, maintenance crews weren't familiar with the Workspore engine, and it's possible that a full-fledged rebuild could have been possible, but would have been impractical due to not only the exported design, but also the model lacking spare parts and being pretty old, which would have been expensive to undertake. As a result of mounting reliability issues and maintenance costs, the power cars were scrapped between 1979 and 1980, as remaining coaches were then powered by the more contemporary FP7s and occasionally GP38s. But would things get any better?
I doubt it.
Despite the replacement in motive power, what remained of the Dutch consist still suffered from electrical and cooling systems that weren't accustomed to Canadian weather, on top of the lack of spare parts and deteriorating maintenance. In 1992, the European coaches were finally retired from the roster, with the ONR resorting to refurbished Canadian-built coaches used originally on Toronto's GO Transit, which in turn offered more flexibility in their design. This in turn caused the stops at Barrie and Arilla to be eliminated the same year, as the portion connecting the two cities was abandoned by CN, resulting in the Northlander to be rerouted along CN's Bala subdivision. By the 2000s, ridership was a pretty modest 35,000 passengers annually, which may have been decent in numbers, but could it get worse?
Well, like the rise of AI, it did. The reason is everyone's favorite word, politics! On March 23, 2012, the Ontario government announced the plan to axe the Northlander service due to rising costs and stagnant ridership, as they speculated on high operating subsidies, predicting a mere 400 Canadian dollars per passenger. Yikes. The final run occurred on September 28, 2012, when the Northlander departed Cochrane Station for the final time.
Obviously, this isn't one of the best days that we want to be celebrating. There's no celebration here. This is actually a rally for the people of Northern Ontario, the people of Cochrane, and all of the interests that we have going forward as a region, as a race of people, obviously, a people who care about who we are, and a people who care about where we're going.
Hundreds of rail fans and citizens alike went lineside to witness the final run of this legendary train. To many, the Northlander was their connection to the big city, as many people protested along the journey. As many people were wearing shirts and signs saying Ontario Northland not for sale. After 35 years, the Northlander's journey was finally over, practically ending nearly a century's worth of passenger service between the two cities. What did we get in return? A shitty bus service. I mean, bro, like, what a downgrade.
Boom.
God,
That just sucked.
Ugh. Thankfully, this backfired.
Unsurprisingly, the discontinuation of this service left plenty of controversy due to what people considered a short-sighted decision on the government's part, as the service became a victim of liberal greed. One passenger aboard the final train had this to say: "You can't have subsidizing at $400 a passenger. I understand that perfectly, but this is our lifeline up here for a lot of people who have medical issues to go down to Toronto." So yeah, the Northlander was a vital connection from Toronto to many northern and isolated communities. And given that there are certain communities where rail was the only means of getting around, I can only imagine the devastation left by those residents. Unsurprisingly, the government would take this back a few years later, as in May of 2021, it was announced that the ONR and Metrolinx were assembling a plan to reinstate the Northlander service with an almost identical routing, just with the addition of 2 more stops outside of Toronto and a few more station name changes, but it was almost the same routing as the original. This revival was followed by a test run in November of the same year with pre-existing equipment. But Metrolinx wasn't a fan of having this equipment inside of Union Station due to the risk of the locomotive plows scraping the platforms.
Yo, Gaming, wasn't there a time where the ONR and Metrolinx had a bit of unusual beef with each other or something?
There was even a time where ONR 1603 was trying to be moved to a heritage railway, but Metrolinx wasn't having it for the same reason.
That in itself is a pretty interesting video topic for a future video or something. Also, rest in peace, York Durham Heritage Railway.
So, what was the solution? Buy chargers. These new train sets are a far cry from their Dutch counterparts, as they promise improvements such as modern interiors, accessibility friendly, comfort seating, you get the idea. As of June 2025, the first train set is under construction, so we are nearing the stages of reinstating this vital connection between the heart of Ontario with the northern communities, with some sources stating that the service is planned to begin in 2026, so we will have to wait and see. It's basically the exact same thing as the Via Charger train sets that Via has, except they are 3 cars long. One thing I hope is they don't get bolted coupling like Via did.
To close off this video, you might be wondering what happened to the OG train sets. Well, in 1997, a preservation society in Switzerland bought 5 cars from the ONR to be used in excursion service, being moved from North Bay all the way to Halifax, Nova Scotia. Starting October 12, 1998, the preserved train set began its voyage out of North Bay, usually thrown behind freight trains that ran with modern power at the time, ranging from the shitbox SD50Fs, modern SD75Is and Dash 9s, and utilitarian Canadian GP40s. Man, the contrast in North American and European stock is so crazy. On October 19th, the train set arrived in St. John, as they were pushed into the port and were offloaded onto a ship and sailed all the way back to Europe. However, the train sets would have a turbulent time in preservation, ranging from being left in Hamburg for months, transfers to different owners, declining condition and restoration delays preventing them from returning to service. Thankfully though, the remaining cars sit on static display at the Netherlands Transport Museum in, oh my lord, I'm not even going to try and pronounce that, put that up on screen please, being cosmetically restored to their trans-European roots. Meanwhile, back in Canada, a control car and a dining car are rotting away in an old dump in North Bay, Ontario, right beside their former stomping grounds. A shame really, but not everything's lucky, you know?
Then again, it could be a lot worse. The Northlander's existence was rough. a promising start with new train sets, only for them to be problematic, and even with improved equipment, the train only fell to the wayside due to government slashing. Thankfully, with the Northlanders revival coming soon this decade, rail travel between the two cities will be reinstated once again after 13 years since the last Northlander left Cochrane back in 2012. People remember the Northlander fondly, from normal passengers getting away for a vacation to conductors and engineers that traveled along the route for many years. To many people, the Northlander was a symbol of community, linking a lifeline between northern Ontario to the capital of the province. And with the Northlanders' planned return this decade, the story of this train will continue on for many years to come, as a welcome comeback in the history of Canadian railroading.
Man, what is it with the government of Ontario screwing over everything related to trains?
You guys are lucky to even have public transit. All we have is like one city bus and 2 via trains 2 times a week.
Bro, you got Prairie Dog Central number 3. That's good enough!
What?
I'll just say my outro so things don't get chaotic. Bye.
Alright, that's enough from me. Thanks a lot to Cal Unit Productions for having me on this video. It was a blast, but now I gotta start my walk all the way back to Winnipeg. I blew my entire life savings trying to get here on Via's Canadian, which was, you know, like 12 hours late, so... Alright, here we go.
Likewise. Special thanks to my Canadian brothers, the Winnipeg Railfan and Gaming Railfanner, for assisting with this video. I literally kidnapped them. I'd like to wish my Canadian followers a pretty good Canada Day. Enjoy the fireworks, don't be a Brampton driver, and most importantly, stay safe. And to my American followers, I got a video coming for you on the 4th of July, so stay tuned for that. Nonetheless, see you on the next one. Take care, folks.